There's something that deeply bothers me every time I walk into a farm supply store here in the United States and see shelves packed with brightly coloured bottles, each one promising to kill a different insect, each with a complicated name nobody can really pronounce, each costing money that most people trying to grow their own food at home simply don't have. And the worst part isn't even the price. The worst part is that after using all of that, the pests come back. They come back the following week. They come back stronger. They come back like they never left. I've been through this. A lot of people I know have been through this. You've probably been through it too. You buy the pesticide. You apply it carefully. You wait. The pests disappear for a while, and you think you've solved the problem. But you didn't. You just postponed it. And the next time they show up, they come in greater numbers. They come back more resistant. They come back as if the chemical meant nothing, and you go back to the store, and you buy it again. And the cycle never ends. But there is a group of people who never entered that cycle. There is a community that, for over 200 years, has been planting, harvesting, feeding their families, without spending a single dollar on industrial pesticides. Not because they're poor, not because they lack access, but because they discovered something long before the chemical industry existed, something nature already offered for free, something our ancestors also understood, but that was slowly buried as industrial products took over both the shelves and our mindset. I'm talking about the Amish, and what they do on their land to keep pests away for generations is exactly what I'm going to show you in this video. My name is Samuel Carter. I've spent most of my life observing the land, learning from it, making plenty of mistakes, and slowly discovering what actually works when you want to produce real food, without depending on anything that comes in a bottle with a chemical label. And what I learned about the Amish method of pest control was one of the most surprising things in that entire journey. Not because it's complicated, but because it's so simple, it almost feels impossible that it works. But it does, and I'm going to explain why. Calmly, the way nature teaches, no rush, no fluff. Before anything else, I want you to understand something fundamental about how the Amish see the land. To them, a pest is not an enemy to be destroyed with chemical force. A pest is a signal, a warning that something in the balance of the garden or the field is off. It's like a fever in the human body. You don't treat a fever by just taking a pill and ignoring what caused it. You investigate what's out of balance. You fix the root of the problem, and then the fever disappears naturally. The Amish look at aphids, caterpillars, beetles the exact same way. They ask, what is wrong in the environment that is attracting this? And the answer is almost always found in how the land is organized. What is planted where? What is growing next to what? And how the soil is being treated. That's the foundation of everything. Without understanding that, you will never understand why their method works so well. It took me years to fully understand this. For a long time, I still thought of pests as an external problem, something that came from the outside and had to be fought from the outside. But the land kept teaching me slowly that most serious infestations happen because the garden itself is set up in a way that invites them in. A plant standing alone, without neighbours that protect it, without diversity around it, is a vulnerable plant. It's like leaving a child alone on an unfamiliar street at night. The danger doesn't come from a specific enemy. It comes from the lack of protection. The Amish never plant just one crop over a large area. Never. That's almost a rule within their communities. While industrial agriculture moves in the opposite direction, creating massive monocultures that depend on chemicals precisely because the lack of diversity creates the perfect environment for pests to explode, the Amish do the exact opposite. They mix. They alternate. They place plants that protect each other side by side, not randomly, not for aesthetics, but based on knowledge built over generations about how each plant affects the environment around it. And this is where the real secret I want to reveal to you begins. There's a specific combination of plants the Amish use to create what I call an invisible living fence around their gardens and fields. It's not a fence you can see. It's not a physical barrier. It's a natural chemical barrier. A mix of scents and compounds that plants release into the air and soil that confuse, repel, and discourage pests from settling in. The first time I saw an Amish garden up close, what caught my attention, before any explanation, was the sheer diversity of plants growing together. Some of them I would have never thought to include in a garden. Herbs most people only know as kitchen seasoning. Flowers that look like decoration. Shrubs that seem like they're there by accident. But nothing was there by accident. Every single element had a precise function within that system. Now let me ask you something before we continue, and I want you to answer honestly, not to me, but to yourself. Have you ever given up on a garden because of pests? Have you ever watched a plant you cared for over weeks get destroyed in just a few days by insects that seemed endless? Have you ever felt that frustration of not knowing what to do, of trying everything and nothing actually working? I know how discouraging that is. I know how painful it is to watch your work disappear like that, and I know that a lot of people watching this right now have already thought about giving up on growing their own food because of exactly this. If you've been through that, I want you to go down to the comments right now and write, "I lost my garden to pests and almost gave up." Write it. Because when you write that, you're not just venting. You're telling other people going through the same thing that they're not alone. You're building community, and that community is what keeps us strong on the path of producing our own food with independence. Every comment down there with a real experience is a signal to beginners that the struggle is normal, that everyone goes through it, and that there is a way through. And speaking of paths, this channel exists for exactly that reason, to show that there is another way, that old knowledge is still alive, that it's possible to grow healthy food without chemicals, without unnecessary expenses, without depending on the system. If you're not subscribed yet, I invite you, openly, sincerely, to subscribe now. Hit the button and turn on notifications. Because here, every week you'll find this kind of knowledge. Things that were forgotten. Things older generations once knew. Things that modern life buried. and that can completely transform the way you care for your land and produce food for your family. Now let's get back to the core of what I want to teach you today. This invisible living fence that the Amish build around their crops. It's formed by a combination of elements that work together in layers. And each layer has a specific function that I'm going to break down carefully, so you understand the full mechanism. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can adapt it to your reality, whether it's a small backyard, a garden bed, or a larger piece of land. The first layer is what I call the confusion layer. Pests reach plants primarily through smell. Insects detect the specific scent of the plants they feed on from a distance. They follow that signal, find the plant, land, feed, reproduce. That's the basic cycle of an infestation. What the Amish do is disrupt that scent signal before the insect even gets close to the plant they want to protect. They do this by planting around and between their crops a variety of strong aromatic herbs whose scents mix with the vegetables and create what I call an olfactory fog. That fog confuses the insect. It detects a mixed signal. It can't clearly identify where the plant it wants is located, and many times it simply leaves and looks somewhere else. The herbs the Amish use most for this are basil, mint, sage, rosemary, and lavender. Each one releases different aromatic compounds, and when you plant them together, intercropped with tomatoes, peppers, kale, lettuce, and other vegetables, the scent profile of the garden becomes so complex that most insects can't navigate through it efficiently. Take aphids, for example, one of the biggest problems in home gardens. They detect the scent of young, tender plants from a distance. But when that scent is mixed with the strong smell of rosemary, sage, and mint, the signal they receive becomes distorted. They get closer, but the confusion increases, and often they give up before even landing. Now there's a detail here that took me a long time to truly understand, and it makes all the difference. It's not enough to plant aromatic herbs randomly in your garden. Placement matters. The Amish learned over generations of observation that these herbs need to be planted along the outer edges of the garden, and also interwoven throughout it like a network. The outer edges create the first barrier, the one the insect encounters before entering. And the internal network ensures that even if an insect gets past the outer layer, it remains disoriented inside the garden space, unable to easily locate the plants it's looking for. This is what you'd call layered protection. Not a single line of defense, but multiple overlapping ones. The second layer is what I call the active repulsion layer. While the first layer confuses the insect, the second one directly repels it. And here comes an element that, when I first heard about it, I'll be honest, I was skeptical. It didn't seem possible that it would work. But when I saw it with my own eyes on a small family farm in rural America, where this method had been used for generations, I had no doubts left. The element is simple. Wooden stakes treated with specific natural substances, placed at strategic points inside and around the garden. I know, it sounds too simple. A wooden stake. But the logic is precise. The Amish traditionally used cedar, pine, or other naturally aromatic woods, woods that release essential oils known to repel insects. But beyond the wood itself, They rub these stakes with a mixture made from crushed garlic, pepper, and leaves from certain strong scented plants. Once applied and exposed to the sun, this mixture releases vapours for days, and those vapours create what I call a discomfort zone around each stake. Insects that approach that area feel the effect of these volatile compounds on their antennae and membranes, and they back away. They don't die. They just leave. And this is a crucial philosophical point the Amish are very intentional about preserving. They don't want to kill every insect. They understand that many insects are essential for pollination, for soil health, for the balance of the entire ecosystem. The goal is never extermination. The goal is balance. To push away harmful insects without destroying the beneficial ones. And this stake method does exactly that, because it mainly affects insects that stay on the surface of leaves and stems, the ones that cause damage, while pollinators like bees, which fly differently and rely on different sensory cues, are far less affected. The preparation used on these stakes can be easily adapted to anyone's reality. You take a whole head of garlic and crush it into a paste. Mix it with 2 tablespoons of cayenne pepper, or fresh hot peppers finely crushed. Add a handful of strong scented leaves, like rue or other locally available aromatic plants known for their repellent properties. Then dilute everything in about half a litre of water. Let that mixture sit for at least 24 hours. After that, take your wooden stakes, any type, and soak them in the mixture for about an hour. Remove them and let them dry in the sun. Once dry, place them into the soil throughout your garden, spaced roughly 5 feet apart, especially along the edges. Reapply the mixture once a week, or after heavy rain. The effect is not immediate. It doesn't work like chemical pesticides that kill within seconds. It works like a continuous protection system that builds over time. After 2 weeks, you start noticing a difference. After a month, the difference is clear. The plants become calmer, the attacks decrease. And this kind of protection doesn't require anything industrial. It doesn't require anything expensive. It doesn't require anything you can't find in your own backyard or at a local farmer's market. The third layer of the Amish system is the one I consider the deepest and the most beautiful to understand, because it works with something beyond plants and aromas. It works with the natural enemies of pests themselves. Over generations, the Amish learned to identify the insects that feed on other insects, the birds that eat caterpillars and beetles, the small creatures most people don't even notice in a garden, but that act as silent guardians, protecting every leaf and every fruit. And more importantly, they learned how to attract these creatures and how to create an environment where they want to stay. Take the ladybug, for example. It's a natural predator of aphids. A single ladybug can eat hundreds of aphids in a single day. But ladybugs don't show up in gardens that lack diversity. They come to environments that offer variety. Places with small flowers where they can find nectar when they're not hunting. Places with dense foliage where they can shelter. The Amish always plant a wide range of flowers around their gardens, not for aesthetics. Flowers like dill, cilantro that has gone to seed, carrots that have been left to flower, calendula. These small open flowers are a feast for beneficial insects. They keep them present. They keep them fed. And therefore they keep them ready to act the moment a pest appears. Birds are another key piece of this system. A sparrow, a robin, a small backyard bird that regularly visits your garden can drastically reduce caterpillar and beetle populations without you having to do anything at all. The Amish actively encourage birds by building simple perches, small wooden structures where birds can land and have a clear view of the garden. They also keep a clean water source nearby, because birds need water and they return to places where they find it. These are practices anyone can replicate with little to no cost. Using scrap wood you already have. Using a simple bowl or container with fresh water replaced daily. There's also a practice the Amish use called companion rotation. It's different from crop rotation, which many people are already familiar with. In crop rotation, you change what you grow in a space from season to season to prevent soil depletion. In companion rotation, you change which protective plants are growing alongside your main crops, rotating these combinations over time so that pests never adapt to a fixed pattern. And so the soil continues to receive varied benefits throughout the year. The Amish do this naturally because they've learned it since childhood. They know, for example, that calendula next to tomatoes works well during the early growth phase. But later in the cycle, basil becomes a better companion. That kind of detail doesn't come from manuals. It comes from generations of observation. Let me tell you something I learned from a much older man. A man who was already over 80 years old when I met him, on a small rural property here in the United States. He had never heard of the Amish, but he used a system remarkably similar to theirs, developed independently over decades of observation and experience. One afternoon, we were sitting under a tree, looking out over his garden, and he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "The most dangerous pest in a garden is not an insect. It's impatience. It's wanting fast results. It's not having the patience to let the system establish itself, to give time for protective plants to grow, to allow beneficial insects to find the environment and choose to stay. Those who are impatient buy chemicals. Those who are patient cultivate balance." That sentence stayed with me in a way no book ever could. Because it's true. Every natural protection system takes time to establish. It doesn't work overnight. But when it works for years, for decades, without cost, without toxicity, without harming the soil or the life that keeps the garden alive. It's like building a house. If you build fast with weak materials, you'll be fixing it every year. If you build with care, with solid materials, you'll live peacefully for decades. The Amish system is that well-built house. It's a protection system that, once complete, becomes self-regulating. When a new pest appears, the natural predators already present increase their activity and bring the situation under control before it becomes an infestation. When a plant becomes vulnerable for any reason, the aromatic herbs around it provide an extra layer of protection while it recovers. And when the soil is healthy, the plants themselves become stronger, because soil rich in microbial life produces plants with stronger immune systems, plants that can generate their own defensive compounds more efficiently. And this last point is one of the least understood secrets of all. Healthy plants defend themselves. They produce natural chemical compounds that repel insects, that make their leaves harder to digest, that even attract the natural enemies of those pests. But to do that, they need healthy soil. Poor soil, compacted, lifeless, lacking organic matter, produces weak plants that can't activate their own defense mechanisms. They become vulnerable. And then any pest can take over easily. The Amish understand this deeply. That's why soil care is always the foundation of everything else. Before thinking about protecting plants from pests, they think about how to keep the soil alive, rich, and balanced. Composting is central to Amish life. All organic waste from the household and the land becomes compost. Nothing is wasted. Vegetable scraps, pruned plant material, harvest residues, animal manure, everything returns to the soil, either directly or through composting. And this constant return of organic matter keeps the soil full of life, full of beneficial fungi and bacteria that help plants absorb nutrients and activate their own defense systems. It becomes a self-sustaining cycle, a virtuous cycle that, once established, keeps itself going. There's another element of the Amish system I want to mention, because it's important, and because it's something anyone can start doing immediately, even without any prior preparation. The Amish perform regular inspections of their plants, not with the anxiety of someone expecting to find problems, but with the calm of someone who observes carefully and acts early when necessary. They walk through the garden every morning. They look under the leaves. They check for insect eggs. They look for signs of caterpillars, for fresh damage. And when they find something, they act immediately, by hand. They remove the eggs. They pick off the caterpillars and move them away from the garden. They prune heavily infested leaves before the problem spreads. To most people today, this kind of hands-on intervention feels outdated. But it's incredibly effective. One caterpillar you remove today prevents 50 tomorrow. A cluster of eggs you eliminate now prevents an infestation next week. The problem with industrial solutions is that they always arrive too late, because most people only act when the problem is already visible and severe. The Amish method teaches you to act early, at the root, before imbalance has a chance to take hold. And here I want to return to the idea of attention and observation, because this is, in my view, the most transformative aspect of this entire philosophy. When you begin to truly observe your garden, when you learn to read the signals plants and insects leave behind, you start developing an instinct no manual can give you. You learn to recognize the smell of healthy soil versus unhealthy soil. You learn to see the difference between a leaf suffering from lack of water and one under fungal attack. You learn to identify beneficial insects and feel a sense of relief, even joy, when you see them. Instead of fear or disgust, you learn to notice when something is drifting out of balance before it becomes a serious problem. This is knowledge that develops over time. It doesn't come from a video. It doesn't come from a book. It comes from time spent observing, experimenting, making mistakes, and learning. But a video or a book can accelerate that process. It can give you the right concepts, the principles that guide your observation, the patterns you'll begin to recognize in your own garden. And that's what I try to do here. Not to give you a magic formula that fixes everything automatically, but to give you the principles that the Amish and old-school farmers like that man I mentioned carried within them. The principles that guide every decision they make on the land. There's one principle I haven't mentioned yet, and it's central to Amish thinking when it comes to pest management. It's what I call temporal diversity. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. They don't plant everything at the same time. They stagger their planting. So the garden is never all in the same stage of growth at once. Some plants are just sprouting, some are growing, some are producing, some are being harvested, or have already been harvested and are resting. This creates diversity over time, and that makes it much harder for pests to establish themselves. Because a pest that targets young plants, for example, won't find the entire garden in that stage at once. It will only find a portion. The damage is limited, and the areas that are not vulnerable can even act as refuge for natural predators, who will help control the problem where it appears. I also want to talk about something that few people mention when discussing the Amish system: the role of water. Overwatering is one of the biggest factors contributing to pests and disease in home gardens. Soil that is constantly waterlogged encourages fungal growth, attracts moisture-loving insects, and weakens plant roots. The Amish water with restraint. They always check the soil moisture before watering, and they prefer watering in the morning, so excess moisture can evaporate during the day, and leaves don't stay wet overnight, which is when many fungi and certain insects are most active. This simple change, adjusting when and how much you water, can make a massive difference in the overall health of your garden. Another practice the Amish follow strictly is the careful handling of diseased plant material. When a plant becomes severely infected or heavily infested, they never leave that material to decompose inside the garden. They remove it, they take it far away, and they either burn it or bury it at a distance, because a diseased or infested plant left to rot in the garden becomes a breeding ground for the next wave of problems. Insect eggs from infested leaves reach the soil, fungal spores spread through the air, and what seemed like a solved problem returns, multiplied, in the next cycle. The Amish understand that strict sanitation is just as important as any protective method. There's also something I want to share about the community aspect of the Amish method. Something I find deeply inspiring and directly relevant to what we're building here on this channel. In Amish communities, knowledge about pest management is never kept by just one person. It's constantly shared. When someone discovers that a certain plant combination worked especially well in a season, that knowledge spreads to neighbors, to family, to community gatherings. When someone faces a new pest they've never seen before, the whole community comes together to understand it and find a solution. It becomes a system of collective intelligence, growing stronger over years and generations. And that's exactly what we're trying to build here. Every comment you leave sharing your experience, every question you ask, every result you report, All of it feeds a collective conversation that benefits everyone involved. When you write in the comments that you tried planting a certain herb next to tomatoes and it worked, someone just starting out will read that and feel encouraged to try. When you share a pest problem you faced and how you handled it, someone going through the same thing will find a clue that might change everything. That's the spirit of the Amish method. And that's the spirit I want us to cultivate here. And that's why I want to reinforce this. If you're not subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe now. Because every video here brings a piece of knowledge that has been built and passed down through generations of people who lived from the land with autonomy and wisdom. I don't invent anything. I research, I experiment, I learn from people older and wiser than me, and I bring it here in the clearest and most practical way I can. And what's here stays here, for you to come back to whenever you need. Now I want to talk about something very practical that you can start doing in your garden this week. No matter the size, no matter if you have land or just a few pots on a balcony. You can start with the first layer of the Amish system I described, the confusion layer. Plant at least 3 different aromatic herbs around your main crops. Basil, mint and rosemary are an excellent combination and easy to find at any nursery or local farmer's market. Plant them along the edges of your garden bed or place pots with these herbs around your vegetables. You don't need much space. You don't need much investment. But the difference this makes in pest activity is noticeable within weeks. In the following week, you add the treated steaks with the garlic and pepper mixture I explained. Make the mixture at home. Treat the steaks. Place them along the edges and throughout the garden. Reapply once a week. Simple as that. In the 3rd week, plant some calendula or flowering dill to start attracting beneficial insects. And place a water source nearby for birds. Within a month, you already have the first 3 layers of the system working. From there, you can gradually add complexity, learning companion rotation, learning to read the signs, developing the awareness that every good grower needs. I know it sounds like a lot when you list everything like this, but in practice, once these actions become part of your routine, they become natural, simple, almost automatic. And what you get in return is immense, not just healthier plants and fewer pests, but the satisfaction of knowing that you're caring for the land the right way, a way that respects natural cycles, a way that generations before us already knew worked, long before chemicals erased that knowledge from our collective memory. Now, there's one thing I want to address before we close, because I know many people are wondering, what happens when pests show up anyway? Because they will. No matter how well you build your system, there will be moments when something gets through. Moments when balance shifts temporarily. Moments when an attack happens. So, how do the Amish deal with that? When it happens inside an already established system. First, they act quickly and manually. They identify the problem area. They remove the most affected plants, or the worst parts of them. They handpick visible insects and remove them or relocate them away from the garden. Second, they reinforce the repulsion layer in that specific area. They apply the garlic and pepper mixture directly to the affected plants and to the surrounding stakes. Third, they check the condition of the soil in that area, because a localized attack is often a sign that the soil there is weaker, more compacted, lower in organic matter, less alive, and they correct it. There's also an emergency practice the Amish use in more severe situations, a solution made from fermented tobacco leaves. When properly diluted, this solution has natural insect-repelling and insecticidal properties that work effectively in emergency cases, without causing the long-term damage of industrial chemicals. The nicotine in tobacco is toxic to many insects, but it breaks down quickly in the environment, leaving no lasting residue in the soil or on the plants. It's a last resort, not a habit, but it's there when needed. What I want you to take from this video is not a recipe. It's a mindset. The mindset of someone who sees the garden as an ecosystem, not a battlefield. Someone who seeks balance, not destruction. Someone who thinks long-term, who plants protection before problems appear, who observes calmly, who acts with precision, who respects the rhythm of nature, even when urgency is pushing hard in the opposite direction. The Amish are living proof that it is possible to feed families, entire communities, for centuries, without chemicals, without industrial dependence, without unnecessary cost. They don't have a magic secret. They have attention. They have patience. They have a system built over generations that works because it respects how nature actually works. And you can build that system too. You can start small, in a pot, in a garden bed, in a backyard. You can learn step by step, making mistakes, correcting them, observing, adjusting. You can build, piece by piece, your own food independence, free from chemicals, free from dependence, free from the cycle that sends you back to the store every season, with money in your pocket and hope that this time it will work. I'll keep showing up here, sharing everything I've learned and everything I continue to learn. Every video is a piece of this knowledge we need to recover together. If this video gave you something valuable, if you learned something that will change how you care for your garden, then I ask you for one simple thing. Like the video. That helps this channel reach more people who are searching for this same path. And subscribe if you haven't already. This is a place for real learning, for knowledge that works in practice, for wisdom tested by life, not just theory. In the next videos, I'll bring you more practices like these, more knowledge that modern life buried, but that those who lived from the land never forgot. Because the land hasn't forgotten. Nature hasn't forgotten. We're the ones who need to remember, and we're going to remember together.